Today, we are diving deep into one of the big ones, Plato's Republic. This book doesn't start with some easy answer. Nope. It opens with a bombshell accusation that justice is basically a lie, a story told by the powerful to stay powerful. It's not just asking a question, it's throwing down a challenge to the entire idea of a moral society. I mean, really think about that for a second. Is justice just a nice-sounding word the strong use to keep the weak in line? Is it just a tool to hold on to power? This is the explosive idea at the very heart of the Republic's first book. And wow, is it a question that still echoes in our world today, thousands of years later? And this is what's really at stake here. Plato, speaking through his mentor Socrates, isn't just playing some abstract intellectual game. He is digging into the very foundation of what it means to live a good life in a just society. For him, you can't figure out how to live until you've wrestled with what justice truly is.
Okay, so here's how we're going to trace this incredible argument. We'll start down in a busy harbor, watch 3 big attempts to define justice get shot down, and then we'll see how Socrates masterfully dismantles each one. And maybe most importantly, we'll discover why ending up confused is actually the entire point. So, let's get into it.
You know, Plato doesn't start this in some quiet, stuffy classroom. He drops us right into the middle of the action, the bustling, chaotic port of Athens, the Piraeus. Socrates actually says he walked down to the harbor, which is this great symbolic move, right? A descent into the messy, commercial, political heart of the city. This debate is grounded in the real world from the get-go.
So, the scene is set. It's a festival day. Socrates gets persuaded by his friends to pop into the home of a respected and very rich old man named Cephalus. Everything feels relaxed, totally conventional, almost pious. But it's right here, in this seemingly peaceful living room, that one of history's most intense philosophical battles is about to kick off.
The whole argument unfolds like a series of challenges, each one tougher than the last. First, you've got the old man, Cephalus, who offers this simple rule-based view. Then his son, Polemarchus, jumps in to defend a more traditional, warrior ethic kind of justice. And then, bam, the sophist Thrasymachus just crashes the party with a cynical, power-based definition that threatens to blow the whole conversation wide open.
So, let's dig into that first round. Socrates starts chatting with the elderly Cephalus, asking him what the best thing about being rich is. And Cephalus's answer, well, it reveals his entire worldview. For him, justice is kind of like balancing your checkbook with the gods. He's glad he's rich because it means he could always be honest and pay his debts, which means he won't get punished in the afterlife.
And right there, we get our first definition. For Cephalus, justice is simple. Just follow the rules. Tell the truth, pay what you owe. It's this very straightforward common-sense morality. You know, the kind born from a long life in business and a desire to have a clean conscience before you die. Seems reasonable enough, right? Well, Socrates, with just one single, absolutely brilliant example, completely shatters that simple definition. The madman with a weapon. If you just follow the rule, pay your debts, you'd be giving a deadly weapon to someone who could cause incredible harm. All of a sudden, that simple rule becomes a recipe for disaster. The definition completely falls apart.
And this just perfectly illustrates a huge point. Justice isn't about blindly following rules. It demands judgment, wisdom, and thinking about the consequences. And once his definition is broken, Cephalus very conveniently remembers he has to go attend to some religious duties, basically handing off the argument to his son, Polemarchus.
Okay, on to the next stage. Polemarchus jumps in. He wants to defend the spirit of his dad's idea, but he gives it a twist. He pulls out a traditional saying, the kind of thing every Greek schoolboy would have known by heart.
Now, this is the justice of the tribe, of the city-state, of the soldier. It's all about loyalty. Good is what's good for us, bad is what's bad for them. And, you know, it feels deeply intuitive. It taps into a core part of how we often think. But Socrates is about to expose a huge contradiction hiding right at its heart. And here's where Socrates just brilliantly flips the script. He gets Polemarchus to agree that justice is a human virtue, right? A kind of excellence. Then he asks the killer question. Can a good thing ever make something worse? Harming a horse makes it a worse horse. So doesn't harming a human being make them a worse human being? In other words, more unjust? And this leads to a really stunning conclusion. If justice is a virtue, it can't produce its opposite, injustice. Therefore, a just person, when they're acting justly, can never harm anyone. This was a totally radical idea, completely cutting against the grain of ancient Greek culture. and it leaves poor Polemarchus utterly baffled. Just as Socrates and Polemarchus reach this gentle, almost peaceful conclusion, the entire tone of the dialogue just violently shifts. Thrasymachus, who's this famous, aggressive teacher of rhetoric, a sophist, he's been sitting there listening, getting more and more annoyed, and he just can't take it anymore.
I mean, Plato's description here is pure cinema. Thrasymachus doesn't just join the conversation, he attacks it. He accuses Socrates of spouting nonsense and demands a real answer, not all this polite philosophical back and forth. This isn't just a debate anymore, it's a full-on confrontation.
And there it is, Thrasymachus' legendary definition. He basically says, look, in any state, whether it's a democracy, an oligarchy, whatever, the people in charge make laws that benefit themselves. And then they call obeying those self-serving laws justice. So justice is nothing more than a fancy word for what's in the interest of the powerful. It's a brutal, cynical, but honestly a very powerful argument.
Socrates, completely unfazed, just calmly begins to take it apart. He starts by pointing out that, hey, rulers can be wrong about what's good for them. Thrasymachus tries to counter, saying a true ruler, in the strictest sense, doesn't make mistakes. And Socrates says, okay, great, and turns that very point against him with the famous craft analogy. Think about it. A true doctor, as a doctor, seeks the health of the patient, not their own paycheck. A true captain seeks the safety of their crew. So by that logic, a true ruler, as a craftsman of ruling, must seek the good of the subjects they rule over.
Now, the argument with Thrasymachus gets even more complicated, but the book ends without a clear winner. Thrasymachus is silenced, but he's definitely not convinced, and Socrates himself admits that he has no idea what justice actually is. This feeling of being totally stuck, well, it's intentional, and it even has a name.
This state is called aporia, a philosophical impasse. By the time Book I is over, every single conventional definition of justice is in ruins. Everybody is confused. And for Socrates, this is not a failure. It is the most essential first step. Before you can even begin to seek the truth, you have to admit that you don't already have it.
So you might be asking, why spend an entire book just tearing everything down? Well, it's because Plato is clearing the ground. He's showing us that all the easy, common-sense answers we all walk around with are just not good enough. He's getting us ready for a much deeper, much more difficult investigation.
Thrasymachus might have been silenced, but his core idea that the unjust life is actually better than the just one is still just hanging there in the air. And Plato's own brothers, Glaucon and Adeimantus, who were there listening, they're not satisfied. They think Thrasymachus gave up way too easily. And in Book 2, they're going to bring his challenge back in its most powerful, most terrifying form, forcing Socrates to build an entire city and speech just to answer it.
And that is the ultimate achievement of this brilliant opening act. It strips away all of our comforting illusions and forces us to face our own ignorance. Book 1 does not tell us what justice is, but it ensures we can no longer pretend that we already know.